Is this where you pretend there's music and we always dance in the beginning?
Yeah, this is
Our
it.
It's like
intros have gotten
sprockets.
really awkward.
That's because normally we're also spending the first 3 minutes looking for Kurt. We found Kurt.
Hey, I'm here.
He's out on bail.
I'm out of hiding. By the way, did you notice that someone in Baltimore County got charged for the riots at the Capitol today?
Oh, really?
The riots from a month ago today got charged.
Is that who they thought you were when they charged you?
I think so.
There's
I think
just
so.
too many giant white guys in Baltimore County.
Right?
They're charging all of them.
It was a case of mistaken identity. What are we drinking today, Kurt?
Today, we are sampling Trailblazer straight bourbon whiskey from Lost Ark Distilling Company. And then we also have one of their signature drinks, which is the, what's it called again?
Skysail. But
The Skysail.
This is important. This is our most important episode to date because we know that the best whiskey comes from Howard County, where I live and where I'm elected. And we all know that everything good comes out of Howard County. And they even started in Laurel, which is where I was from. So this is probably and this is also, isn't this our 500th episode? So there's a big celebration too. I'm gonna get funnier as I start drinking. I haven't started drinking. Don't worry. It's like all dates start off a little bit awkward. As my wife knows, I can talk until it's no longer awkward anymore.
So we also have Gideon with us today, and our special guest is the head distiller, founder, and the head man at the Lost Ark Distilling Company, Brad Blackwell. He's joining us live on location from the headquarters in Columbia, Maryland.
Thanks for joining us, Brad.
Live on location. I feel like I should point to something like a weatherman or like a news reporter.
This is way more like Good Morning Vietnam style weatherman. What's the weather like, Franklin? It's hot.
Anchorman.
Exactly. Yeah, this would not be the real news. What I like about this episode already is I have 2 glasses sitting next to me ready to go. So that means I'm ready.
There we go.
Now, Brad, it's a little harder with you because I've had pretty much every spirit you guys sold, which shows that you were dipping into my Hanukkah money. But today we're starting with featuring one, which is the 4-year whiskey. Before we sort of dive into drinking, can you tell us a little bit about how you started the business and what it's been like?
Oh man, what a loaded question to start with. How much time do we have? No, I'll make it brief.
I mean, we'll show them the bottle. We have that long. We have this long. Oh, that was a bad Jewish joke in there.
My bottle's getting empty, so.
So how did you get into whiskey?
Talking to your mic.
How did you get into whiskey?
Yeah, it's cool before there were so many breweries. You know, you can go down the street and get good beer now. You know, 14 home brewing, we'd get together on the weekends, brew beer, and started looking around doing research on breweries, honestly. And was never serious about it, just reading and kept seeing articles about craft distilleries on the West Coast. Now, remember, this is 2014, so this is very early on in the whole new distilling movement. So just thought it was a cool idea, man. Take my skills and stretch them to the next level and do something that no one else is doing locally.
And you started off in Laurel, right? And then
Of course, I love whiskey too.
And so what was the first spirit that you started?
Being one of the first ones around, it took us a little time to figure out where we could be, you know, local legislation and whether they would allow us to open a distillery. So there was nothing on the book since Prohibition allowing it or prohibiting it. So it just took us a little while to get going, about 2.5 years to get open. So we ended up here in Howard County. They were so welcoming and jumped right in with us. And we actually signed a lease in Laurel. We never got to open over there. We ended up jumping locations over here to Columbia, and it worked out really well.
And what was the first spirit that you guys started with?
We started making rum. We released a white rum first. That's kind of the base for everything that we do. And we soon released a spiced rum. And then just this last year, we've expanded the whole line into some flavored rums. We have coconut, vanilla. One of our best sellers is a toasted hazelnut and coffee flavor. So those are super fun.
You're giving us a lot of episodes here. Now, today we're doing the 4-year Trailblazer, which I've been waiting some time for. Personally, my sister, who's a big fan of your distillery as well, bought me, when you first started, you were selling bottles that could be sold once the bourbon was done. So I actually just got my first bottle. Obviously, I waited a little bit of time. But can you tell us a little bit about that 4-year-old whiskey that we're going to be drinking today?
Yeah, so Trailblazer is a curated whiskey. We bring the barrels in, and when we bring them in, we pop them open and grade them. So we grade them on aroma, flavor, mouthfeel, all that good stuff. We figure out what's good as it is. You know, if it's going to be a single barrel, if something stands out, it's exceptional above the rest, we'll bottle it as a single barrel. Otherwise, we find profiles that we think are complementary, and we end up blending them together. And this is something brand new to me that we started this last year. Blending is a whole art in itself. It's extremely difficult. I'm still learning, and in all these years of training my palate, you know, now it's getting put to the test. But yeah, we do the blends. We're doing some cool finishes. Like right now, we have some bourbon and Jamaican rum cask. We have some it used to be a bourbon barrel, then they put maple syrup in it for a year, and now we have bourbon back in it, kind of soaking up that maple syrup flavor. So doing some experimental cool things like that, finishes, blends.
So you said we can do a Lawyers on the Rocks
Unique-
barrel. we can do a private
Absolutely.
stock Lawyers on the Rocks barrel. Now, please, you know, what I love about whenever we buy bourbon is we get, and I don't know if you can see me, we get these tiny little books, which are made for me because they make my hands look huge. But don't make me read this thing. So tell me, you're going to steal Gideon's job for a second and make him obsolete for at least a quarter of the episode. But what should we be looking for when we're tasting this?
So this Trailblazer is unique. One of my favorite bourbons, and what I have most of my collection at home that it's not Trailblazer, not my own bourbon, is a wheater. There are two primary, I guess you could say, recipes or mash bills of bourbon out on the market. And to be bourbon, it has to be primarily corn, 51% or more corn in the recipe. And most of the time it's corn, rye, and malted barley. Now, I love personally corn, wheat, and malted barley. That's like Maker's Mark, Weller's, Pappy is a wheater. Anybody a little bit familiar with whiskey will probably know those names. So I'm a huge wheater fan, and so that's what I wanted to work with. So we bring in only wheated bourbon. So the wheat bourbon gives you a little bit of a more mellow mouthfeel, kind of a creamy mouthfeel. You really taste that corn. It lets the corn shine through, but it also gives you a little bit of a grassy, bright note that kind of sticks out in the front as well. So a lot of people like to associate that with young bourbon. That's not necessarily true, but it's just kind of the grassiness of that wheat as opposed to the spiciness of a rye. So you get that, a little bit of baking spices, like an apple pie baking spice.
You got a good nose.
The normal caramel vanilla. Now taste it and tell me you don't taste that.
You know I'm going to, because I'm a cheater. The sad thing is I do.
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes you need to be educated. That's why we asked you first. Now, I cheated a little bit, Brad, just to talk process with you a little bit, because you taught me something I didn't know, which is when I came in around the holidays, you gave me sort of an early tasting, and you were explaining to me that this stuff starts off at much higher octane. And I know that's us good verbiage there, but can you just explain sort of in the making how you bring it down, you know, sort of bring down the alcohol content and how that affects the flavor? Because that was something, frankly, I didn't know. And on this show, you know, we have our fair share of whiskey.
Yeah, I'll try to break it down real quick without being too long-winded. But when we make whiskey, it's kind of like we make beer first without the hops. Obviously, we don't want it bitter. So it's a grain base. We're going to use corn, wheat, and barley. We're going to cook that and ferment it, and it makes alcohol. So imagine we have a big tank here. It's a 1,200-gallon fermentation tank. It's like a big can of beer, basically. So when we're done fermenting, we're about 7% ABV. So compare that to a local craft beer, 7%. But we don't want that. We don't want the beer part. We're not all of it anyway. We want the good stuff out of it, which is the alcohol. What distillation is that it purifies the alcohol out of that beer. So literally, and we have done this before, we've gotten beer from the brewery next door, Hysteria Brewery, and distilled it and ripped the alcohol out of it. But it's called distiller's beer at this point. We rip the alcohol by distillation out of that beer. And if we were to pull it out at pure proof, 200 proof, pure ethanol, it's just a chemical. There's no taste, no color, no smell, and that's boring. Nobody wants to drink that. So the way it gets the flavor is that we do an imperfect process of distilling. So we don't bring it out at 200 proof, but we bring it out when we're doing whiskey, probably 140 to 150 proof. So let's just say that's we're bringing across a small percentage of that beer flavor. So that brings the flavor of the corn, the wheat, and the barley, and that's what makes it distinguishably different as a bourbon as opposed to anything else. And that goes across for all spirits. So if you're making rum, it's made from sugar cane, you're going to get the flavor of the sugar or the cane juice or the molasses. If you're making brandy, it's from fruit. So if you're making it from grapes, and you get the flavor of the grape in there, and that's what makes every spirit a little bit different. So
yeah,
think of distillation as a purification process.
I tried it before you brought it down. I think it felt like a damn pirate. I mean,
I
it
think
was
you tried the
strong.
rum. It was 180 proof. Yeah, 180.
Oh, buddy.
I also thought it was a bath later and climbed in.
So
But I've been
back in the
cleansed.
day, that's like drinking straight Everclear. So in college, we used to host parties. Hypothetically, all the statute of limitations has passed.
Yeah, you're not
and,
Mike Pence. You're not a
and
snitch.
and
calling in
people,
parties.
we would give out a cap full of Everclear to everyone that came into the party to kind of prime the pump, so to speak.
That's like back when I was bartending, we had 151 and some people would want you to light it on fire for them. I mean, at 180 proof, you could power a small automobile probably.
Yeah.
I will tell you, Brad warned me and he said, this stuff is going to be strong. And I figured, I drink a little bit. I should be good. And then once my eyes teared up, Brad looked at me and lost immediate respect. That's a little hard. You gotta keep that. There's a little emasculating in that moment. Try not to cough that. But I'll tell you, man, we drink, I like you guys, but we drink a lot of young whiskey on the show. And if you've ever watched us, we kill a lot of bad whiskey.
Yeah.
And a lot of young whiskey, but this doesn't taste like a 4-year. It doesn't even taste close to a 4-year. And, honestly, I told you, man, I was going to be honest about it because I actually tried not to open the 4-year. I've been drinking your rums and stuff because I wanted an honest assessment, but it's really good, man. It's for a 4-year. I mean, it's really fucking wonderful.
Well, thank you. And that's something
Not like
that
you need my approval, but I'm just saying, it's hard. We want to try whiskeys from a lot of different states and young stuff. And it's really, really, really nice, man. Moving on from the brandy, though, and I want to give you this shot just because this is personal at home. I know you recently did a partnership with Getz's Candy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that started, I met the owner of Getz randomly. I didn't even know at some tasting party a couple of years ago. And during COVID, we switched over to make hand sanitizer. And they just happened to reach out. They saw it and reached out asking for sanitizer for their employees at the factory. And one thing led to another. And here we are a few months later, and we're making a collab product. But what we do is, this is one of the first creams in the state now from all the small distilleries, is we use a cream base. We get the cream from the same factory that they use to make the candy, the famous caramel creams and cowtails that they make. And then we add some of our own rum to it. And then we use flavoring, the same vanilla flavor they use in the candy, we use in this product as well. So the idea, of course, was to make it taste as much like a cowtail and caramel creams as possible and put it in liquid form and put alcohol in it. And can't lose with that, right?
Brad, my favorite part of it, I got to say is, and I brought this up a couple of times, is, my wife is not a huge drinker, but I bring a bottle of that stuff home during the holidays and her and mother go through it like it's milk in the fridge. So, it goes well in coffee, but the best part of it is if you buy a bottle, and I don't want to like throw you under the bus here to make you keep doing it, but you get the free sack of Getz's candies with the bottles when you buy them. So I'm going to need you to really keep that up. You're not really allowed to stop that one.
Now I got to go back and repack all my distribution boxes. Put candy in.
Look, it's a small price to pay.
So Brad, I know we're running a little short on time. It's COVID. Is the inside of the distillery open right now for visitors that want to stop by?
Absolutely. We're open on Friday nights, 4 to 8 p.m. Saturdays, 12 to 6. So a little bit limited hours right now. And also a little bit limited seating, but we are open. We have tables and a cocktail bar. So we do all of our signature drinks here. We also have free tasting. So come on out. I'm trying to try everything, see what you think. And I do a lot of the tasting. So I'll walk you through and tell you how we make them from scratch and all that good stuff. So happy to have anyone who wants to come hang out with us on the weekends.
That's awesome, man. What's your address for anybody that's listening?
9570 Burger Road. And we're right off of Snowden River Parkway in Columbia.
And I just want to tell you, I really put a lot of effort into being professional and appropriate during this part. I know I'm used to cursing a lot more, saying inappropriate things. And I just want to tell you, I really put a lot of effort into being appropriate. That's probably why I'm less funny right now. I feel like I'm toned down. It's like human Ritalin.
I haven't known you very long,
Adam
but this
can't
is
even
probably
look at
your
me.
longest non-cussing streak I've seen. It's pretty good.
I'll just say that I've been incentivized not to this time around by a couple of different people that have a lot of sway in my life. But I promise you that once we jump off, I'll go right back to my old ways. I'll be off probation. But look, thank you for joining us. The one thing that I want to say before we jump off with you is they have an amazing sort of hybrid indoor-outdoor situation with the garage door and seating. I'd really like to get back with you in the future, talk about and try some of the other spirits and do another sort of longer episode with you. potentially in person, which we discussed. So if you live in Howard County or the surrounding area, please support local business. You know, you guys, like you said, you sort of brushed over it, but you jumped in and you gave away a ton of sanitizer. You weren't making a lot of money on that or any money at all. So during COVID, that was a really important service. And as a Howard County resident, I'll say thank you for that. But we look forward to doing this again sometime soon.
Thanks, Brad.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, appreciate you guys.
All right.
Enjoy your drinks.
Definitely. Cheers.
Fuck, I can curse again. That's the way
I'm
it
still
works,
here.
right? Like,
I heard you. Gotcha. All right. Take care, guys.
see you, buddy. Look, it's the way it has to work. I got my sister. I have his business partner. I promised them that I would tone it a little bit down. But now that we got some stories to talk about, you know what, guys? I'm ready to be me.
It's good.
So-
This is a good drink, by the way.
So we got a lot of really, really, really good
Short
stories
ones.
to get through, and
Yeah,
a
we did.
lot of legal material to kind of cover. And the top topic I wanted to cover, it touches on a bunch of different things that we've talked about over the course of time, but really on our one of our core practice areas here at the firm, which is DUI and DWI defense. And people go, "Oh, you got arrested for DUI, you must have been wasted." Well, this story from the New York Times, which we'll link to in the show notes, says demonstrably otherwise how good people can otherwise get roped into a police officer's mistaken belief that they are intoxicated. Bruce Springsteen refused to provide a preliminary breath test, according to National Park Service officer, said he watched the musician take one shot of tequila.
And then
Surprise.
jump on a fucking Triumph motorcycle. That's my favorite part of this story. Sorry to go ahead and skip to the end, but the boss, who you guys know I love, huge Springsteen fan, is hanging out in a state park, shooting tequila, riding his fucking motorcycle.
By the way, he's
That is
shooting
fucking
tequila.
awesome.
He's shooting tequila with like some random people.
Yeah, I mean, he's a man of the people. He probably just shares his tequila with everyone. Motorcycle rides. I mean,
It's in that cool leather pouch on the motorcycle, and then he pulls it out. That's the way I picture it. Look, outside of his
absolutely.
batshit crazy Jeep commercial that he did for the Super Bowl,
Yeah,
I loved
that was
him before
kind
that
of a low
anyway.
point.
That's a whole different topic, whole nother day. But
All
if you watch the Super Bowl, you start.
So let me give you the statement.
Facts
Let me
first.
give you the statement of probable cause that the police officer from the National Park Service wrote. Springsteen claimed that he had. Okay, let me back up a step. This happened at Sandy Hook Lighthouse in a national park on the northern coast of New Jersey. And it happened on November 14th. Springsteen claimed that he had 2 shots of tequila in the last 20 minutes. The officer said. The musician added he smelled strongly of alcohol and had glassy eyes. The National Park Service ranger reported conducting a series of field sobriety tests. By the way, the boss is 71 years old.
Hell yeah.
He was visibly swaying back and forth, Ranger Hayes wrote, and took 45 steps during a walk-in turn test rather than the 18 he had been instructed to take.
He was walking on stage.
Mr. Springsteen refused to provide a sample on the preliminary breath test, which ultimately is not admissible in any court in this United States. That's where it ends. There's no mention of Mr. Springsteen's ultimate blood alcohol level. 2 people who spoke to Mr. Springsteen on the condition of, spoke to the Times on condition of anonymity, said that it was 0.02%, 4 times less than New Jersey's legal limit of 0.08. Mr. Springsteen, who was riding a Triumph motorcycle, was charged with reckless driving, drunk driving, and consuming alcohol in a closed area. The National Park Service refused to release the full arrest report and has not responded to requests for information.
That's crazy, man.
First of all, I love when we talk about DUIs on the podcast because it's lawyers drinking while talking about people getting arrested for drinking. So that's always a fun moment for me.
I'm walking home tonight, though, just for the record.
Well, here's my issue with this whole thing.
I wish I was driving my
0.02,
Triumph,
Your rollerblades won't get you a DUI.
my motorcycle.
0.02 is a drink.
Yeah.
It's a drink.
Yeah.
Cops saw him do a shot with some fans. I'm sure if you were sitting there at a lighthouse and the boss rolled up on a Triumph motorcycle
With a bottle of Patron.
yeah, he's absolutely getting the entire bottle if he wants it
Yeah.
because he's the boss.
I'd be
Fuck
pissed
yeah.
it was only one shot. Like I'd want to hang out with the dude a little bit longer, have some questions, hang
Yeah.
out. You know,
Yeah.
Adam probably want to get a signature on a movie or something.
Play some tunes.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So Mothers Against Drunk Driving, a classy national advocacy organization, condemned their delay in disclosing his arrest. The fact that this arrest was not revealed by authorities in New Jersey until after Springsteen's appearance in a Super Bowl ad is infuriating, said the group's president. Victims and families deserve for every drunk driving offense to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law as a violent, 100% preventable crime every time. No excuses, no exceptions. Okay. That's a wonderful sentiment, except
It's not the law
in this case, .02 is not drunk driving
in the state of Maryland
or in New Jersey. It's not even presumed to be impaired driving. It's not presumed to be anything.
There's a bad line that you tell clients when you're prepping these cases for trial, which is it's actually not unlawful to drink and drive. Now, I'm not saying that that's my political belief that you should drink and drive, but it's not illegal to drink and drive. The issue is, are you under the influence, as in 21902 A1 or 2, or are you impaired, as in B1, or under the influence of drugs or alcohol, C1D? So these are the subsections in Maryland that are applicable. Now, no one wants to walk into a courtroom in front of a judge or jury and say, oh yeah, they had drinks and they drove, but they weren't impaired on the influence. But that is actually a much more common argument than you really may think. So here, and no one's in Annapolis, as we say in Maryland, arguing against the mothers of drunk driving, right? Like when Noah Leota, who was the police officer in Montgomery County that was killed by a drunk driver leaving Hooters in Rockville in 2015 or 2014, 2015, there was then legislation immediately passed, which completely revamped all of the administrative penalties for DUIs. And I believe some of the subsequent offender statutes, if I remember correctly. But
hold on, if you drive to Hooters, isn't that assumption of the risk?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, but the .02 is, I get he's famous, but no prosecutor in the state of Maryland, unless someone died as a result of a collision, because there are other statutes that may be applicable, would charge an O2 DUI. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, this is a straight and all pros.
Yeah. So I understand.
If you don't, absent something else, I mean, and let's just say the boss could theoretically have been on pain medication, consumed simultaneously with a couple shots of alcohol.
I mean, he's also fucking 71.
But he's 71. Yeah. So there's no expectation that he's going to be able to perform admirably on fucking field sobriety tests.
We are also not promoting drinking and driving.
Oh, let me say one other thing. So the tests that are administered, the standardized field sobriety tests, are what's called divided attention tests. Okay. Which means that the officer is giving you instructions about the test simultaneously to demonstrating the test, simultaneously to requiring you, the suspect, to perform the test. And so when he's doing that, he's trying to distract you. It's literally his job to try to distract you while he's doing that.
Yeah, I know plenty of sober people that have not passed the test. In fact, there's the school in Baltimore where if you're a junior prosecutor and you're handling traffic cases, they'll often let you go, and the prosecutors will actually be the ones drinking, while some of the trainees or other officers who may be not what's called NHTSA certified, so National Highway Safety and Traffic Administration certified to administer these tests, and the prosecutors will come back and be like, man, I had one beer, and someone comes and gets them later, and it's a fun night if you're a prosecutor. But the whole point was, a lot of the prosecutors that I know that went through it would come back and say, fuck, man, the tests are a little bit harder than you think. Like, the first one they do is horizontal gaze nystagmus, right? Which is involuntary movement of your eye, which Kurt does a lot more of these than I do, but a lot of people have that naturally. Or standing on one leg. I mean, how many of you can honestly stand on one leg sober for a period of time? So
I can.
Can I ask a question?
Because you're wearing 80s basketball shoes.
But it's very different, because if you're doing it on the road, on the side of the road, with cars whizzing by at 60 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour.
In the middle of January.
In the
morning while you're drunk.
Yeah.
Oh shit. I mean, when you're innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
Let me ask
there aren't a lot of innocent people charged with DUI. I will throw that out there. I mean, most people, that's the one thing that throws me, right? We could all joke around, but 2 shots. Like, I know he said he saw it, but like the number one answer when you get pulled over, and please,
2 drinks.
Yeah, stop saying 2 drinks. No one has 2 drinks. Like, you either had 1 drink or 8 drinks. Like, stop saying you had 2 drinks. No one had 2 drinks.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How much does time play into the factor here, right? So like both the time to absorb the alcohol into your bloodstream and also metabolize it from your bloodstream.
So that's a really good question. So one of the potential issues that you could have is in Maryland, at least, you have 2 hours to take a breath test, and you have 4 hours to take a blood test.
So we used to hand out these cards, right? And
Oh yeah,
we'll
those the
scan it and
old
put it
school
up there.
business cards.
These are some of the first business cards we wrote, right? And just talk about what it says on the back.
So, what the question is, was your breath test accurate? And we've got a scale, nobody's going to be able to see this online, but it shows your weight and then the number of drinks that you have. So for example, I weigh 240 pounds. So I can have, I don't know, 4 or 5 drinks and still be under the legal limit. Whereas someone who weighs substantially less, 140, 160 pounds, can only have 1 or 2 drinks.
You see how he looked at me and then stopped? He's like, damn, I ain't sure how chubby Eldridge got during COVID. Like either 140 or 275.
And in terms of over the course of time, they say it's typically 0.01 for every 0.01 BAC for every 40 minutes that you're sitting not drinking,
which comes down to about a beer or a glass of wine per hour. But
right.
You also have to be careful. And this is something you learn.
But that's yeah, because people have different metabolisms. What have you eaten that day? Have you
everyone's
eaten
on the
anything?
keto diet now. I mean, that keto diet has been, we're talking about throwing a sort of a monkey wrench.
The keto defense.
Yeah, it's a full-on defense. If you have diabetes, and you could have ketoacidosis. So there's a ton of medical defenses that factor into this. But I don't know what of those are applicable to Mr. Springsteen, Dr. Springsteen, but I guess we shall see.
It's good stuff.
I love this story. It brings in so many things that I love, including my favorite musician, riding motorcycles, which I think is cool. I don't really want to do that, but I think it's cool, and riding them drunk, which
I feel like Patron,
I also don't want to do, but I think it's cool.
I feel like Patron needs to do an ad.
Yeah, do
someone's got to do an ad. I'm just glad they took that Jeep ad down. I'm sorry, that was my least favorite Super Bowl commercial.
I do have to say though, Adam, I really, really wanted to troll you and be like, wait, is Bruce Springsteen the guy who started the punk movement in the same way that you always troll us over the movies that you haven't seen?
Gideon, you should have just done it. That's the point, man. You got to jump in and take advantage of the situation.
Okay.
Adam's got his Springsteen jeans on. You see how tight these jeans on. They're made in America.
I mean, I could probably conjure up a hypothesis that Springsteen actually started the punk movement in American rock and roll and American music. Just give me a week, Gideon. I'll come back next week with a thesis on that.
On this week's episode of I Can't Believe It's Not Baltimore, an attorney in Tampa is accused of exposing himself and soliciting sexual favors from a Pinellas County jail female inmate.
Well, when you say it's a Tampa attorney off the jump, then we know it's not Baltimore, and it takes some of the disbelief out of it, Kurt.
It is a Florida man.
And also
an attorney.
It always
we would have guessed Florida. It was Tom Brady.
Andrew Spark. Yeah.
Lawcat.
Andrew Spark, best name ever, is charged with soliciting for prostitution, exposure of sexual organs, and possession of contraband in a county detention facility.
Exposure of sexual organs is the best statute title I've ever heard.
I agree. Detectives,
not pipe organs.
He would film.
It was a pipe organ. That's the problem.
He was
soliciting. Smoke the pipe organ, man.
I'm just tossing them up,
dude. That was that wasn't even low hanging.
Yeah,
that was right in my face hanging.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Kurt. I feel like this story has already
jumped the shark.
Yeah, jumped the buck.
The tip said that Spark would film the sexual acts on his tablet in exchange for money,
not the shark. It jumped
in exchange for money that he would put in the inmate's commissary account.
Okay, gotta get
dude.
paid.
This is so old. This has happened in Baltimore so many times. It's happening as we speak. I guarantee
it. Jeremy's shaking his head. Yes. Okay. So the bottom line is this has in fact happened in Baltimore. Next motherfucking topic.
No, I mean,
I definitely just avoided an HEC complaint.
I mean, we can make some more jokes about this if you want. But.
Nope. It happened in Baltimore.
The only one you missed.
Next topic.
Just the tip. That was the only thing that you missed there. But this happens. I mean, not even anything I'm involved in. Was it Tavon Wilson? Tavon. It was at Central Booking Intake Facility. There's been a prosecution out of there. There's been a prosecution in MTC, Baltimore County.
Yeah.
Carroll County.
Baltimore County, or the Baltimore City murder case I worked on 10 years ago, had a woman posing as an attorney to go in and have sex in a contact visit with an inmate.
Oh, that was I'm going to stop there before I break attorney-client privilege. We're just going to keep going. That happened in Baltimore. Thank you. God, that's been like the best that happened in Baltimore version ever. I think of 4 or 5 different ways.
I think
was
actually
involved.
we could probably say that Baltimore invented that transaction.
I mean, I have too many examples. Like the problem is Kurt usually pulls stories involving alligators, which are naturally Floridian. So whenever you throw like reptile transporting or something weird like that, it's harder to make that Baltimore. But once you throw sex in a jail in, like, yeah, we're fucking, if we didn't invent it, we found a better way to do it. Like if it ain't San Quentin in California, we're doing that shit here.
Yeah. It's
So you gonna cover the IG story, Mr. Eldridge?
I will. So Isabel Cumming, who interestingly, if you know anything about her, is a former Baltimore City State's attorney. She recently, or within the last couple of years, became the Inspector General for Baltimore City. And as such, she has done a lot more high-profile investigations. And the Inspector General, just very simply, really does 2 main things that would be of concern to the public. The first is that there is prosecution. The second thing is, which is not always a public thing, is that the IG will be given an investigation or come upon an investigation, and then we'll issue a report. And those reports are not always made public, but can result in the termination of employees, the exposure of fraud and waste, or in this case, simply giving the public information about a tip. Now, what happened with Marilyn Mosby is that last year we found out as a public that Marilyn Mosby had received a ton of gifts.
Maybe you
and
should
had a lot of
remind
travel.
Can you
had also
remind
had been out of the office 180 consecutive or 180 non-consecutive.
That's what I was getting.
I was
days.
going to
So
ask you to
days, nights,
remind the
weekends.
listeners and the viewers who Marilyn Mosby is, because I'm guessing, since the last time we spoke of her, we've probably picked up some new listeners.
So Marilyn
may not
Mosby
be as
is the
familiar.
current Baltimore City State's attorney.
That's right.
She
Okay.
was elected and beat our buddy Greg Bernstein. And then shortly after, Freddie Gray was killed or died, depending on how you want to frame the issue. And she prosecuted the 5 police officers that were all acquitted of those crimes. And she has been a hot button issue in Baltimore City, a city that's been plagued by 350 murders continuously. And she is truly someone you either love or hate or both. Now, Marilyn, it came out that she had donated a lot of gifts that were given to her as part of these various speaking engagements. And so the IG initiated an investigation. In fact, Marilyn Mosby came out publicly and said, please investigate me, which was a very, very sort of arrogant or confident thing to say, please investigate me and clear me. The problem is, we'll link to this article in the show notes, that when Cumming actually looked into all of these issues, she found that Mosby disclosed that she was gone for over 100 days. 85 of these days were on her state ethics forms, but she was gone an additional 59 days that were undisclosed. She had taken trips during this time to Nairobi, Edinburgh, Berlin, Lisbon, and they were paid for nonprofit criminal justice organizations. However, of these 15 trips, some of which I just mentioned, she disclosed none of them to the Board of Ethics the Board of Estimates, if they needed approval. Now, the problem is she disclosed them on her state ethics filings, but she did not ask for permission. And that's where Cumming goes on to say that some of these trips, because of the amounts, or some of these gifts because of the amounts, and we're talking about whether it's cash, hotels, some gifts that she said were donated at her winter solstice, which is the winter holiday event for prosecutors. These things have to be not only disclosed in ethics forums, but sometimes you have to make the Board of Estimates aware. I think the biggest thing that comes out of this, honestly, are number one would be the tax implications, which Cumming alludes to in the report, and in fact on her interview on Fox 45 discussed. So is the United States Attorney's Office or another investigatory agency going to take a harder look, which if I'm her, I'd be seriously concerned in light of some of the information that Cummings put out to the public. But the second issue, I think, is as a former prosecutor in Baltimore City and a former city resident, I keep highlighting that we're well above 300 murders. And when you're above 300 murders and the chief prosecutor for the city is out of the office a total of 140 days of a 365-day calendar year, while making the highest out of any public official in the state of Maryland.
How much does she make?
$240,000. I believe it's $238,000.
Good
Not
gig.
well, other than the head coach of the football team and the basketball team for the University of Maryland.
I mean, hell yeah.
She's the third highest paid
Terps.
public employee in the state of Maryland.
She's the
believe
highest
so.
elected.
Highest elected official in the state of Maryland.
So the issue then becomes, if you're absent for almost half of the year, and we're a city that is obviously decimated by murder amongst all of the other violence that we have, and we're not touching armed robberies, carjackings, attempted murders, which flow into the hundreds every year. Why are you not in the office? And is the idea of you touring the world more important than being home with your children, so to speak? So those are the things that I think are going to be the continuing conversations coming into the next election, because while people found her sort of very helpful in light of Freddie Gray, a lot of the public felt like she brought some of this information to light, which I'm not going to debate momentarily because that's not the story today. I think the fact that she's an absentee landlord is going to be the story moving forward, and then whether she can maintain her job and she's actually prosecuted by the feds.
I mean, is this just going to end up as a non-story mostly because all her own money? Like if
This time around, I'm just not so sure, because in Baltimore City, we have a history of that. When elected officials have tax implications, they don't generally let them go. And D'Souza is probably the best example, who was the former police chief in Baltimore City for only about 6 months. And when he didn't pay his taxes, they prosecuted him. So
Pew.
Yeah. Pew is another good example. They don't generally let tax cases go. So,
when it involves public officials.
Yeah. So I think if there's anything to sort of hang a hat on, that this is going to be yet another non-story in the major stories of Marilyn Mosby not affecting Baltimore and murders, I think this may be what ends up, causing the issue. I don't want to say it's the Al Capone thing, but on the show, if you ever listen, we always talk about people go down for like the shit you don't expect. And the shit you don't expect is fucking taxes, right? Because if you're that high profile, pay your fucking taxes or don't cheat on your taxes. But here, there's a lot of red flags: the gifts, the travel, the company, which is Mahogany Elite, that she started for travel purposes, but wrote off $5,000, but didn't have income. So there's a lot to look at. That's very concerning to me if I'm Marilyn Mosby.
Yeah, I don't know. It just sounds to me like something that there's loopholes that haven't been disclosed that she's just gonna squeak out of. I don't know.
That's why we see an IG report. And, the IG report doesn't result in charges, but I think it's good information for the public to have. We've seen this with Joan Pratt before. We've seen this with other city agency leaders. And oftentimes it doesn't necessarily result in charges. But what did you see when all of the Joan Pratt was comptroller for the city? We saw a lot of information come out regarding how she spent her day and the money paid. And then the next thing we heard, that influenced the next election, and Bill Henry is now the comptroller. So whether this results in charges or it results in a change in office, the information is concerning in a variety of ways if I'm a city voter.
I think the difference, just really quickly, is I think Mosby would have lost the last election if she hadn't had whatever
two
adjective
opponents
you want to use, strong opponents who garnered, I mean, if you take,
They each got about a quarter of the city vote.
right. So, I think no matter what you want to say, no matter what happens to Mosby, there's a little bit of Teflon with her. It just depends on how the electorate lines up the next go round. And if it,
the numbers were obvious, right? If
Right.
Theroux was not in the race and those votes translated directly to Ivan would have won the election.
100%.
So, the numbers were pretty clear, frankly. It was just that Ivan and Theroux were splitting a lot of the same city voters, which come from the same parts of the city, right? So
which is why I think, to Gideon's point, and as a resident of the city, I think he and I share the same cynicism. It's just going to be the same shit over again. I mean, this is like barely a chink in her armor. I mean, this is a nothing for her supporters. This is a nothing burger for her supporters.
May not be for her supporters. We'll see how it is for the feds. I guess we'll continue watching this story.
I mean, I guess she could be reelected from jail.
She wouldn't be the first.
All right. So a couple listener updates. So the first is law clerk Lauren says, Jeremy, if you struggle to stand on one leg, try Pilates. I bet you'd be into that.
If that was an invitation, just tell me where we can do bar.
Isn't that
the name of a Pilates
listener / associate Clarissa wants to know whether or not you would represent Marilyn Mosby.
Well, I turned down a Capitol stormer. I've turned down
But that's because he was your business partner. You couldn't represent Kurt in that case.
I turned down one Capitol stormer. I turned down a graffiti anti-Semitic / Nazi supporter or white supremacist, could I represent Marilyn Mosby?
Wow, that's quite a bucket.
For the
you
right
just
You know,
created
I
there.
wouldn't want to, but the problem, the look on many of my friends' faces, like Ivan Bates, close personal friend, could be worth it, but I'd really
Yeah.
have to evaluate that. Yeah, it would be hard. It would be really hard. But it also depends what she gets charged for. I may just want to know, like, if she got charged for sex in the institution, like in the last story, that maybe I don't know. I don't know.
Exposing sexual organs.
Marilyn, if you get charged, Kurt and I are here for you.
All right.
Guys.
So we had this really, really, really interesting legal story that's cropped up, and I'm going to link to an analysis from Above the Law blog, which is a really great legal blog. They follow Supreme Court and sort of top legal topics of the day. And the question is, as it relates to the impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump, where is John Roberts? We learned that Senator Patrick Leahy, President pro tem of the Senate, and a man who is not intimidated by thugs will preside over the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump instead of Chief Justice John Roberts. The announcement confused anyone with passing familiarity of the Constitution, since impeachment trials of presidents are explicitly to be presided over by the Chief Judge of the United States. And yet, according to Leahy will be taking on the role of judge per a working agreement between Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell. Why do these Senate leaders get to bypass the constitutional text? Good fucking question. Roberts is on board with it, which raises even more questions as to whether or not Roberts is abdicating his constitutionally delegated duties in action, which would justify his own removal.
Let's do it.
The Constitution does
Take him
not
the fuck out.
offer a lot of guidance on the subject of impeachment. One of the few concrete requirements it provides is that the Chief Justice shall preside over the trial of the president. So the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. When sitting for that purpose, they shall sit on oath or affirmation. When the president of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside, and no person shall be convicted without concurrence of 2/3 of the members present.
Kurt, you've already, that's the thing. He's not the president anymore.
Yeah.
So that's the first argument that is presented, and then I don't want to say it's dropped by the folks at Above the Law, but
it seems like a fairly weak argument, candidly.
so that's what they
That's
what
a
they
1L
say.
argument.
Yeah, it's a 1L argument. The sticking
We call
point
those
No offense,
throwaways.
Gideon. No
No,
offense.
the
we love you,
sticking
but it's a
point seems to
throwaway.
depend on what the meaning of the word "the" is, just as the impeachment turned on
That's like a
former
Bill Clinton
impeachment
defense right
turned on the meaning of the word is. The chief judge must preside when the president of the United States is tried. Trump is a president of the United States, but he is not currently the president. They actually call this a disingenuous argument that a former president can't be tried under articles of impeachment.
That's true.
Let's jump into it. The really interesting point here is the what if he's impeached, and that
He has been.
I'm sorry. If
Convicted.
they vote and he's convicted, I apologize. So if that happens, how does Chief Judge John Roberts' absence affect the validity of that conviction? And it says in the article that obviously the Supreme Court has gone out of its way to say that impeachment proceedings are political in nature, but you just have to wonder, and I think that that's what this article discusses, is the impact of his absence. And we don't have a ton of information.
I'm going to throw out another concept, and I understand what it expressly says in the Constitution, but it also says under Article 3 that the Supreme Court shall try disputes between the states. And that's not what they do. They assign like a special fact finder or a magistrate judge to go out and like when there was a boundary dispute on the Potomac River between Maryland and Virginia, they assigned a magistrate to go out and find facts and say, all right, where's this boundary? Where's that boundary? And then they rendered an opinion on it. So they weren't the actual trial court. Now they're supposed to be the actual trial court, but they weren't in that particular case. So I think a better question is, it doesn't sound as though the chief judge has delegated his duty, but if he can do it in other circumstances, or the Supreme Court can do it in other circumstances, can they do it in this circumstance?
which sounds more like a may than a shall. I mean, when you're reading the law, and if you're a lawyer and it says shall, that is usually an indication of very little wiggle room. But there are a couple of Maryland rules involving bail, for instance, where there's a shall, and most judges read that as a may. So, I'm not terribly surprised by that, but there's just not much precedence or regularity in these proceedings. And unless I'm wrong, and feel free to educate me, Kirk or Adam, there also isn't a lot of information coming out about why he's not there necessarily, outside of that they just chose to do it a different way.
Well, do we know? So we know that from this whole quote unquote disingenuous argument that as a former president, he can't be impeached and prosecuted for impeachment.
No, that's bogus. He can absolutely be impeached
Right.
as a former president.
Because there's precedent for this.
Right.
And I think it was the Secretary of War for one of the Civil War post Reconstruction, Andrew Johnson's Secretary
I was
of
letting you get there,
War.
buddy.
to bar him from subsequent public office.
So who presided over that impeachment trial? Do we know?
Mm.
Was it the Chief Justice or was it delegated to another authority?
Well, it's always delegated to the vice president or whoever's sitting in charge of the Senate at that moment, other than for
in the
the
case,
president.
it's because he
For
wasn't a
for
president.
like the Secretary of State, for anybody else,
And
it's
that's what they
always,
discussed with the Secretary of State issue.
right.
Well, I guess we're going to have to look that one up.
Well, I
should
mean, I
make that a
guess
good trivia.
Well, it
question.
wasn't a president, so I was just trying to throw that out there.
No,
There's
but
another
that's-
factor there.
But that's really what
involved.
we're all looking to, though, is there's not a ton of guidance on that issue. And I think everyone's just a little surprised because when it says shall, you expect the shall to mean something.
But I think your point is interesting, Jeremy, in that the Supreme Court, based on their past precedent, and Roberts, whether you agree with him or not, is a strong believer in past precedent of the court and sort of the the austere nature of the court and the history of the court. I mean, he is someone who is very entrenched in that. And so if it is a political question, I think undoubtedly, if there is a conviction, it doesn't sound like there is, but if there is a conviction, he almost undoubtedly is going to say it was a political question.
Well, okay, let's say, why is this a problem and why are lawyers on the rocks talking about it? We're talking about it because the obvious issue is if there is a conviction, does the fact that Justice Roberts wasn't sitting there presiding over it present an issue for Donald Trump wherein he can seek some level of relief if he's convicted? That you didn't follow the rules, you didn't have the right person there, he should have been there, ergo, I'm not guilty, essentially. And there's not a ton of guidance on that issue.
No.
Well, there's a
So-
lot of guidance on that issue. We can assume, or we can almost guarantee that Donald Trump is going to do whatever the fuck he wants to do, no matter what. I mean, he's not going to be guided by some legal principle.
No, but-
the man sent
But it's not about that. It's the
an armed
mechanism. But
mob on
but-
the fucking Capitol.
I'm not disagreeing, but the issue is without including the Chief Justice per this rule, do you then set yourself up for appeal, as we say, practicing that now he can walk himself in, given a legal mechanism to a higher court and try to vacate it? And I think that to me is the bigger issue. The other big issue that's not mentioned in this article, but now we're hearing about is what about the 14th Amendment, which is, the joke about the 14th Amendment is that it absolutely covers all.
Why are we not on? Hello.
You can definitely see Gideon talking on the phone right now. So
Video's live, maybe not the audio.
turn it on, turn my speakers on. This will be fun. We can't tell if we're live or not. But the issue is without including the Chief Justice per this rule. Turn my speakers on. This will be fun. We can't tell if we're live or not. But the issue is yeah. So like I said, Gideon fucking up the show and shit. So with that being said, the 14th Amendment, if
You just can't hear us, Gideon.
is the most inclusive amendment of all time. It was like they weren't sure if there was going to be a 15th Amendment, so they jammed everything into the 14th Amendment, right? We have,
What's the 15th Amendment?
that was not the question. This isn't a fucking trivia episode for me.
I don't know either.
So you got due process in there. You got privileges and opportunities. You got
applied to the
Privileges
states.
Yeah.
and opportunities.
P&I, baby.
fuck are
You know what I'm
privileges
saying.
and
You know what I'm saying?
opportunities?
P&I clause, baby. So, but amongst the things in the 14th Amendment is the ability to unseat a president by vote. Right. So the question then becomes, if they don't convict him, are they going to instead use the 14th Amendment to go after him there? I feel like we're at a restaurant and Kurt is like the big kid we can't control and just walking around the restaurant, and all the other families are looking at us like, can't you keep your fucking child in the chair? And now he's playing with his phone and he's so loud. And I'm like, I just wanted to eat out with my wife and have appetizers.
You want to do what with
Listener Peter wants to know why you are totally inept at your technical responsibilities, both Gideon and Jeremy.
I mean, I'm just a little Jewish elf.
Gideon's
I show up
muted.
and
This is
give
fascinating.
Hanukkah gifts. That's
Gideon,
basically what I do.
Say something.
He can't hear you. That's
if
the
only
problem.
I could do this to both you and Gideon in real life, we'd be so much more successful. Next topic.
Let's move on.
And this is mine. Favorite topic of the day. A finding of probation before judgment, otherwise known as a PBJ. Oh, the immigration update? Did I skip that?
Yeah.
Good. A finding of probation before judgment should never lead to deportation. This was an article written by John F. Gossert referring to pending legislation before the Maryland Assembly regarding a modification to Criminal Procedure 6220 or 620, which governs a probation before judgment.
All right, let's take a step back here. So, Judge Gossert, at the time he retired, was and still to this day may be, the longest presiding immigration judge anywhere in the United States. He sat here in Baltimore. I had the absolute, and this word I'm using to the fullest extent of the meaning, the absolute privilege of appearing before Judge Gossert for a couple of years before his retirement. And I have shared the same privilege of speaking with him and serving on CLE panels with him since. He is a stalwart in the area of immigration law, and particularly with respect to removal and deportation in the United States, and has continued even in his retirement to advocate on behalf of justice in the immigration courts. And I'm using that term the same way he would use it. He's not advocating on behalf of my clients. He's a judge. He's not advocating on behalf or on the part of the Department of Homeland Security. He's a retired judge. He's advocating for the cause and the interests of justice. And that's just as he did when he sat on the bench, he's doing now as a retired judge, and coming out in support of this bill, which is sponsored by our good friend and a former guest of the podcast.
Judge fluffing, by the way.
Every
You
word
just
of
did
it.
more judge fluffing than I've ever done with George Littman. You have to drink.
So
The bill is sponsored by our good friend and colleague and former guest
Gabriella
of the
Carr
podcast, Gabriella
and
Carl.
the University of Maryland Immigration Law Clinic. And,
So
and
tell
we
us
are
what-
very biased here. So this is not
100%
going to be a
biased.
story that we're going to give you both sides, because there is no second side to this.
So tell us what the bill does, Jeremy.
So a probation before judgment in the state of Maryland, I like to say, is a legal fiction. It's a legal fiction because if you go to court, you can get a PBJ. So you can plead guilty, or after trial, you can be found guilty, and you can ask for this PBJ. And the benefit of a probation before judgment, and why I call it a legal fiction, is you're found guilty, but you're not actually convicted. So a lot of people don't realize there's sort of two phases in a criminal case. There's guilt, innocence. Are you guilty or are you innocent? And then what is your sentence? A conviction does not occur until after you're found guilty, and then you are sentenced. So we created this way, and various states have a lot of different forms for this, where you can be found guilty and not convicted. And what it really allows you to do to benefit people is, if you're on a job application and they say, have you ever been convicted of a crime? The answer is no. With a lot of probation before judgments, you can actually also, even if you've been found guilty, you can expunge them. So the interplay with this for most people is it's wonderful, right? If you get charged with a very serious crime, a lot of these are like bar fights, one punch, you cause brain injury by
Or
punching
first-time
someone's thumb,
DUI.
or first-time DUIs, you can get a PBJ. Now, the difference right now is that the statute calls for certain crimes to not be expungible, even if you get a PBJ. A DUI is the primary example of that.
Fair.
Where Adam and I encounter larger issues that are not to our client's benefit is the fact that a PBJ is a state of Maryland thing. It is not a United States of America thing. And the reason that's an issue is, once you are found guilty of a crime in Maryland, even if the judge gives you a PBJ, the federal government still views that as a conviction. And because of it, and a lot of lawyers mess this stuff up, they'll say, don't worry, plead guilty to this DUI or this DWI and take a PBJ. Don't worry, it's not a conviction, and immigration won't care. The problem is it is a conviction. DUIs are significant misdemeanors. They can make certain types of non-citizens deportable or removable.
We'll leave aside the DUI issue. The problem with the Maryland PBJ statute as written is that it counts or is considered a conviction for federal immigration purposes because it does require a finding on the part of the court
of guilt.
And there's essentially a two-part federal definition of what constitutes a conviction for immigration purposes, and that is an admission or finding of guilt and the imposition of some type of punishment or sentence. It doesn't have to be jail. It could be a fine. It could be probation. It could be any imposition on your liberty that counts as a punishment. So it's a two-part definition for the federal purposes. And the PBJ, while it doesn't necessarily, I mean, the probation aspect of it is somewhat illusory, right?
Completely.
But it is that finding or that admission of guilt on the front end that the Fourth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals, in a case litigated by another former Baltimore immigration judge, Lisa Dornell, retired, who is as esteemed in my view as Judge Gossert. That is
He's
the
name dropping
case.
tonight, Kurt.
I sound like Jeremy.
He's
Not only
name
am I
dropping.
have we like we've like
But the
more,
question
we have
is,
completely
did
morphed into the same
Judge
human.
Gossert teach you immigration law?
Well, I didn't go to
He
UB,
taught-
so no.
He taught us immigration
Yeah.
laws.
I will say this: the answer to your question is actually,
And I'm
is
pretty sure that
actually-
Jeremy and Emo sat behind me the entire time and talked about NBA basketball.
so which would explain
I
both of,
appreciate you calling it NBA.
which would
basketball.
explain both of your understanding of immigration law. I will answer your question differently, Kurt. Judge Gossert absolutely taught me immigration law as a young attorney appearing in his court. And I will tell you that the first time I ever appeared for an individual hearing in immigration court was on my birthday, January 21st of 2011. I'm a month sworn into the bar, and I appeared before Judge Gossert. And he loved to just clear the court of all the non-lawyers afterwards. And he would sit and he would talk and he would just ask you questions. And that case involved a temporary protected status case with some travel issues. And he asked me on the spot, it was like being in law school again, whether I could explain to him the importance of the Flutie doctrine,
Look,
which all the immigration attorneys out there will know. And I froze and I sputtered and I made an ass out of myself that
I think
day.
that's what
in
the
court.
lawyer just did that got charged, by the way.
That's what
What's great
that's
about
what you
this?
do as a young
turned
attorney.
one segment into from now on, if we say Gossert, you have to drink.
Fine. So be it.
So why is this bill important? This bill is important, and it's been through a lot of revision. And I don't want to waste everyone's time with revision, but I'll say that State's Attorney Rich Gibson, Howard County, has been involved with it, gave some really good feedback, and there's been some modifications. And what I love about this bill is it didn't take anything away. And I think a lot of people's concern here, and without going all the way into the history about a PBJ, is that there's been a lot of revision over time. And right now, the worry initially was that if we just add in this version of a PBJ that doesn't require a finding of guilt, what's going to happen if you violate? Meaning, can you have a violation of probation? Would that give you the ability to appeal? Or would judges be less inclined to give PBJs? Because now for serious cases, but people that have really good reasons to get a PBJ, would a judge maybe not do it because, well, hold on, this is serious enough that I want them to have a finding of guilt? Well, don't worry. This is the first time in legislation that I've seen the you can have your cake and eat it too method, which is, you know what? We're going to leave the original PBJ. We're going to leave that in so that if you have a serious case that someone that warrants a PBJ on the front end or the back end, meaning you did some probation and you're applying for a modification of sentence, you can get one. But they added in this other type of PBJ. And who does it directly impact? It directly impacts two groups of people. Number one is me and Adam's client, so non-citizens. So now you can basically say that, admitting without admitting that you did something, right? I can get these DUIs done. The judges will understand why. They'll still be on probation. You still have interlock, all the same conditions, right? For a DUI, but then you may not be removable from the country. Or if you have a job and the job, like firemen, you may not feel bad for them, but I do. You get a lot of good people that may get one-time DUIs. I'm not talking about molesting a kid or anything, and maybe I have a little bit of moral relativism here. I'm desensitized, but a ton of really good fucking people get DUIs. Should it cost them their job? Should it cost someone in the military their job, their rank, their retirement? This may give people like that an opportunity to say, let me get the PBJ. Don't make me admit guilt. Put me on probation. And then their various employers or the federal government may not be able to use that against them. And that's really what I love about this bill, because it's still up to the judge. It's still up to the lawyer and the client to show that they merit a disposition like this, but it provides a remedy that has been long necessary.
Well, and I think too, I mean, you know,
Can we?
go ahead. Sorry.
So we've been here for an hour, and I can't believe that no one has commented that you guys have yet again dressed exactly like one another. And by the way, the other thing I wanted to say is
being so forward about it.
I'm just a little disturbed because you both independently walked in wearing swackets and glasses.
It's a cardigan.
These are more like smartigans. Yours is really buttoned up though. Mine's open. I mean,
Well,
we look
you
a
know
little
how
different.
I run a little cold. My office is cold, so I'm always a little more buttoned up.
So the other important thing
I don't wanna
that we
look at
had
you.
going on was Gideon had to drop off because we were having some audio difficulties. So our listeners can hear us, but Gideon couldn't hear us and we couldn't hear him. So
Which
we
is
are-
like Gideon's dream.
we are now in now. And if you've watched Spaceballs, you know what I'm talking about. Now is now.
We don't have to go back and record ourselves. So now we're in the future, but we're in the past, and now we're in the now.
We're now.
I've always dreamt
Right
of being
now.
Lord Helmet. If there was a position that I could fill in real life, it would be Lord Helmet. Like I would love to go in and say, we got jammed. I'm going to do all Spaceballs jokes. No one's going to get them. I'm a huge Mel Brooks fan. The bottom line is vote for this bill. Encourage your legislators to vote for this bill. It is it's a great bill. It doesn't make anything worse. It makes everything better. You know, there's just nothing bad about this bill. There's just nothing. There's nothing.
All right, we have one last final segment.
Shit, I threw it too early. I busted too early.
No, you don't have to read.
Oh,
Are we
How'd you do
log
that?
hatting? Are we log hatting?
we're lock at
How'd
it.
you do that without Gideon? You did that without Gideon?
This is the most cats we've ever discussed.
We
without
actually
saying the
dialed
word.
Rod Pontone and we brought him in for the special segment.
I feel actually kind of lame covering this now. Like this story
Dude, but we
died
have
like
the
a
real
day ago.
lawyer on. Stop.
Actually, this shit is fucking
Has
funny.
anyone had the real lawyer on? We're the first podcast to have the real lawyer on. The lawyer can't hear us. Is this another Gideon thing? We got Lawcat, and now we can't hear Lawcat. That's a huge disappointment.
So did y'all read anything about how he got that filter? Like that filter is like something from like 5 years ago. It's
No,
from
really?
like Samsung filter from like 5 years ago.
But it was
It
on
somehow ended
Zoom.
up on
Was
his
it-
Zoom.
It was his
But it's-
paralegal using
But
it,
it's
though?
not it's not a regular filter that you can get via Zoom.
Why was his paralegal using that? Is what I want to know. How much
I don't know.
how much commissary was being paid?
I was
going to
say
that?
maybe he and the
Really? This
and
is
the,
like- it's
and
like
the
being a-
Peruvian lawyer were
It's like being a
buddies.
virtual furry. It's like all the advantages of being a
Exactly.
furry online without like wearing the furry outfit. It's got to be hot in there.
The I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen the video by now, but it is actually like you could not have written that script any better. Even the other lawyer, like the thing that cracks me up is the interplay of the other lawyers. Like the one
They
lawyer
don't even
who,
laugh.
when it comes on, the one lawyer like gets closer to his screen as if like getting closer to your screen is going to change the fact that your opposing
was
counsel is
no
a
sense of
fucking
humor.
cat.
There was no.
The
sense
one
of
guy,
humor.
the one guy is looking down the whole time, and then when the guy says, "I'm here, I'm not a cat," he looks up and he kind of chuckles. Like it's like the perfect affect on everybody involved in that situation. That's what's more funny to me is not this guy, this cat, it's the other cats because they were cool as shit dealing with it.
I'm just mad because people asked me. They said, you know, I like to be a practical joker. I crank called a prosecutor this afternoon, and I'm a funny guy. But if I could have been a cat, I would have been a thunder cat. So they were saying, you know, would you have been a cat? More of a dog guy anyway, but a thunder cat, like. But the cat's just so cute, and because he's an old white dude, it made it even funnier because he was just so damn cute. He was like, I'm not a cat. I mean, Your Honor. I'm
Oh,
not a
and
cat.
the cat does mirror his expressions quite quite well.
You know, earlier in COVID, there was, I believe, a CEO that got stuck being a potato, but no video came out. But I'm surprised this has not happened in Baltimore yet. With all of the instructions, which we've talked about in prior episodes about lawyers not taking a shit, not flushing toilets, not smoking cigarettes, not eating, not being in the car. Like they put a lot of probably understandable regulations on our appearances in court. I'm surprised that no one said, you know what's not on there? Me being a fucking cat, man.
We could probably run a whole episode or at least half an episode of like funny stories from our own practices. Like, let me just tease this a little bit. How many consults have you done with clients over Zoom or video conferencing where they are driving in their car while speaking to you?
Almost
all of them.
All of them.
It's the craziest fucking thing.
Consults with clients smoking weed, consults where you see drug paraphernalia in the background. Yeah, I can do this all day. Consults with girlfriends that walk by in underwear and a bra because they don't realize that it's on. Or consults with your clients that are rolling a blunt and can't fucking pay attention to the questions you ask them. Then you ask them to politely stop rolling a blunt, which is like a really normal question asked during a fucking consultation.
Is there a polite way to ask someone to stop rolling a blunt?
How
does that roll? How does that go? Just
can you just like, if you could pay attention while rolling a blunt, I'd be cool with it, but he couldn't even pay attention. Right? Which then begs the question, did you need the blunt in the first place? But it from someone that used to really enjoy weed, it's just, I feel like, I'm wearing a dad sweater right now, but like, I don't want to be that dude that's like, hey man, can you stop rolling a blunt while I'm trying to talk to you about your case? But that's what the video interview has done. Yeah.
Let's talk about this drink.
It's good.
So the drink is cinnamon,
Lemon, maple syrup
mixed up with the Trailblazer Lost Ark Distilling bourbon. Mixed in a shaker, really delightful. Our bartender was a little skeptical for the amount of lemon that was called for, so we actually did cut the amount of lemon in half. It called for an entire ounce of lemon juice. We cut that in half to about a half.
That's a
shot of lemon juice. I don't think it would have been bad though. I don't think it would have been bad to have that shot of lemon. It would have been fine. It would have given it a nice,
we also got
bright
good
flavor.
Maple syrup, which was good. I mean, I think whenever something calls for maple syrup, that doesn't
gotta
go
use
get like pancake syrup. Like go get some maple syrup. There's a reason they say maple or even honey, but it was really nice. This is a good winter drink.
So I'm going to say a couple of things. Number one, I really like the drink. The one thing I don't love powdered cinnamon.
This could have used a cinnamon stick.
I was going to say a stick.
Oh, he's back.
Like a little cinnamon swizzle stick.
Now, Adam, I got the solution for you, Adam. Here it is. The syrup that I used had a cinnamon stick in it already.
See, there you go. You need some cinnamon syrup, or I would take the powdered cinnamon. I tend to react.
Hold on, you had
it.
syrup with a cinnamon stick. Like I'm sorry to call you a basic bitch, but that's really basic to have.
No, that's pumpkin
basic
maple syrup.
Yeah, no, that'd be pumpkin maple syrup.
Yeah, no, I ain't got none of that. Also, I think you should have been afraid of the lemon juice. I did the recipe as written, and it reminded me. I said this before we started. I don't know how many of you heard it, but it reminded me a lot of the Lion's Tail that we had at the QG, except without the black walnut bitters, which so far has been my favorite cocktail, and I think this is ranking up there as number 2. I'm probably gonna go pour myself another one when we get off of here.
Nice.
Yeah, this is something I would definitely make at home. I think I know she's not listening, but I think this is something that my wife would really enjoy. She's not a big bourbon whiskey drinker, but this is definitely one that I think we could, we would enjoy at home. It's got that sweet, but it's also got, it's
a good winter cocktail.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a great winter cocktail.
Yep. And it paired really nicely with the whiskey. And we normally would say, oh, well, if you have a young whiskey, this is what you're using a young whiskey for. You're using it to make cocktails. This is probably the first time in a lot of episodes that you're able to drink a young whiskey you can have by yourself. Probably would go well with a cigar, which I'm going to do tonight.
Yep.
And drink like this.
Yeah. And in the meantime, for those of you out there who are in Maryland, buy up some Lost Ark. Those guys are cool. It was really good that they came on. I think I can get away with saying this, but Jeremy's been pumping these guys for a while, and they've been really anxious to get on the show, and we really, 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 really appreciate them coming on. And they've got a good product, so buy it next time you're in your liquor store. Go buy their spot.
That's like the best ringing endorsement you can get because he's a curmudgeon-y fuck. And on that note,
Thanks, guys. We'll catch up with you next week.
can we make another cocktail?